Grace, the giraffe, and the river of shade. The sun over the savanna was a bright golden coin, and everything beneath it seemed to shimmer. Dry grass, dusty paths, and the tall acacia trees that reached up like hands. In the middle of it all lived Grace the giraffe, gentle and thoughtful, with a coat the color of warm bread and spots like little maps. Grace could see farther than anyone. From her height she watched the winds move like fingers through the grass, and she could spot a storm before the first cloud thought of forming. Animals often asked her, "Grace, what do you see?" And Grace would lower her long neck and tell them about far hills, wandering zebras, and where the shade would be in the afternoon. But sometimes seeing far made Grace feel like she should also solve everything. If I can see the problem, she told herself, then I must be the one to fix it. That year, the dry season stayed too long. The small water holes shrank into mirrors the size of dinner plates. The leaves grew brittle. The acacias kept their thorns, but lost their softness. Mothers whispered worriedly to their young. One morning, Grace stretched her neck toward the horizon and felt a tightness in her chest. "The nearest full water," she murmured, "is at the shaded bend, a turn in the river beyond Thorny Thicket." "Beyond the thicket?" squeaked Mia the meerkat, standing on her hind legs. "But the ground there breaks like old bread. The little ones could fall." "And thorns," groaned Theo the tortoise, patient and slow. "We must not hurry. Hurrying makes us careless." Grace stamped lightly. "If we don't hurry, the little ones will be thirsty. I'll lead the way. I'm tallest and strongest." "Strongest isn't the same as wisest," clucked Keto the weaver bird from a swinging nest. He was small and quick and always building something. "Let's go together. Each has a gift." Grace smiled, but inside she thought, "The savanna needs answers, not advice. I'll get them to water." They set out at dawn, a small procession of hope, Grace stepping carefully, Mia running ahead to scout, Theo trudging with a steady scrape, Keto fluttering above, and behind the mothers with little ones, fawns and kids and piglets whose feet made the dust dance. The first trouble came sooner than they expected. A sheet of cracked earth lay before them like a puzzle. The cracks were thin at the start, then wider, forming a grid of traps. "I'll step across and carry the little ones on my back," said Grace. Theo shook his head. "Big steps break thin bridges." Keto darted down. "Let me test." He hopped from crack edge to crack edge, tapping with his beak. "Hollow here. Solid there." Grace watched, surprised. Keto's small weight found the strong places. Mia marked them with tiny stones, while Theo scratched slow X marks with his shell's edge. Soon a dotted path appeared across the danger. Small marks for small feet, big circles where Grace could plant her hooves. They crossed not quickly, but together. The second trouble rose like a brown wall. Thorny Thicket. The bushes leaned across the trail, their thorns like needles of glass. Grace lowered her head. "I'll push through." "Wait," Mia said. "We'll clear a tunnel." She zipped into the thicket, her small body weaving between spikes. Keto followed, picking dry twigs with his beak. Theo found a fallen branch and used it like a broom. Grace stood guard so the little ones wouldn't wander into danger. When they finished, a narrow corridor stretched through the thorns, tall enough for Grace and safe for small paws. As they passed, Grace whispered, "Thank you." She meant it. Past the thicket, the land dipped into a shallow valley. Only it wasn't shallow anymore. Rains long gone had carved a gully, and at the bottom lay a trickle of water, not enough to drink, only enough to tease. The far side was not too high, but its edge crumbled at a touch. Grace sighed. "I could jump," she said, "but the little ones can't." Keto's eyes shone. "Then we build. It's what I do." He zipped to a stand of reeds and tugged. Mia gathered stems. Theo brought thick, straight sticks on his back like a lumber cart. Grace leaned her neck and pressed her forehead gently against a stubborn root, loosening it like a lever. Piece by piece, with Keto weaving and Mia knotting, they made a mat, a braided green bridge that smelled like fresh rain. Grace stepped first, testing. It held. The mothers carried their young, and the procession crossed with careful joy. On the far side they rested in one long patch of shade, the kind shade you feel not only on your skin, but also in your heart. "You were right," Grace told them as they shared a few berries. "We truly need each other. I forget that." "God made us different on purpose," Theo said. "My slowness is steady. Keto's smallness is nimble. Your height is hope." They walked again, the air warmer, the horizon shimmering like a curtain. At last they smelled it. River, cool, alive, wrapped in the green whisper of trees. But one last trouble waited. The land before Shaded Bend rose into a small ridge of smooth stone. Normally an easy climb, it had been polished by countless hooves into a slide. At the top, shade pooled under a giant fig whose roots held the bank together. Water murmured below. But halfway up, a calf slipped, bleated, and slid down again. The mothers looked to Grace. "I'll make steps," she said. Grace pressed each hoof into the slope, grinding a shallow notch. It helped, but near the top the stone was too hard. Again the calf slipped, heart racing. Grace closed her eyes. For the first time that day she felt small inside her height. "Lord," she prayed in her giraffe way, a whisper deeper than words, "you see farther than I do. Show us how." When she opened her eyes, she noticed the fig's lower branches sweeping close to the rock, just out of reach. "Could you tie them down?" she asked Keto and Mia. Theo blinked slowly. "With patience," he said, and began up the slope in his quiet way. His weight, low and steady, did not slip. He stopped below the branch. "Grace," Keto chirped, understanding, "lean your neck to me." Grace positioned herself beside Theo. She lowered and arched her neck like a living ramp. Keto scampered up, feet light on her warm fur, and reached the lowest branch. With practiced weaver's skill, he looped and knotted grass stems, then called to Mia, who raced up the shallow notches and added more ties. The branch bowed, then another, until a ladder of branches hung within reach. One by one the little ones climbed, holding to leaves and knots, guided by mothers and watched by Grace's steady eyes. The last to climb was the calf who had slipped. At the top he looked back, breathing fast, then nuzzled Grace's cheek. Her heart felt like the first sip of water after a long day. At last they stood beneath the fig in a sheltered patch of cool. The river bent in a soft S, shaded by boughs that made patterns on the water. Birds sketched loops in the air. Dragonflies stitched sunlight to shadow. Everyone drank. some splashed. Theo simply let the water lap his shell, smiling so slowly it almost looked like stillness. As the sun lowered, the savanna turned the color of honey. Grace gazed across the flowing mirror and spoke softly, not to be wise, but to be true. Today, I learned that seeing far is not the same as standing alone. God made us to need one another, and needing is not weakness, it is wisdom. Keto's weaving, Mia's speed, Theo's patience, the mother's courage, even the little one's trust, all were part of our path to water. Keto fluttered down to her shoulder. And your height was our hope. When we grew afraid, we looked to you, and you looked to God. Grace bowed her head, not from pride, but from gratitude. We are like pieces of a big body, she said, different, but made to fit. As dusk gathered, fireflies appeared like prayers with wings. The animals settled among the roots, safe beneath the fig's umbrella shade. Before sleep, Grace walked a little way upstream and looked back. The braided mat over the gully, the tunnel through thorny thicket, the marks across the cracked plain. The day's journey told a story she would not forget. She whispered it into the breeze. Anger builds walls, love builds bridges, pride walks alone, wisdom walks together. Over the river the moon rose, a silver coin to match the sun's gold, and the savanna rested. The next morning, when they set out for home, the way seemed shorter. The marks were still there, Mia's stones, Theo's X's, Keto's knots. The braided mat had dried stiff and strong. It would help others. The thicket's corridor was a green hallway. Even the smooth stone bore Grace's shallow steps, a path for smaller feet. Halfway back, they met Elder Baba the elephant, who had been searching for his herd. You found water for the little ones? He rumbled kindly. We found it together, Grace answered. Baba looked at the mat bridge, the corridor, the steps. Good work, he said. One day, when the rains are strong, the river will rise. You'll need a bigger bridge. Call me then. I push logs quite well. Everyone laughed, and the laughter was like rain before rain. From that day on, when animals asked Grace, "What do you see?" she did not only talk about distant hills. She lowered her neck and said, I see the gifts beside me. I see a weaver, a watcher, a patient one, brave mothers, trusting little ones, and a God who shaped us for each other. And when the next dry season came, as dry seasons always do, no one panicked. They remembered the braided mat, the green tunnel, the living ladder, and the steps pressed into the hard place. They remembered that healing often looks like helping, and helping is something everyone can do. The savanna still shimmered, the thorns still pricked, cracks still formed. But in the middle of it all, there were also paths, paths made by many feet, many hearts, and one faithful God. And that made all the difference. Moral: God made us different on purpose. Pride builds walls. Love builds bridges. We're strongest when we serve one another, each using the gift God has given. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And don't forget to subscribe to Living Word for more inspiring stories that strengthen faith, bring hope, and remind us of God's love.